Today I bring you the Stafford Gambit, and I'll be showing you 10 traps which exist in the Stafford Gambit. E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6, knight times E5, knight C6, knight times C6, D times C6. But if you look at the black side, black has so many pieces which have active play. All these pieces can jump anywhere and white has to respond. So in this position, black is threatening to take the pawn. So white has to think a way around to defend their pawn. So we are going to try the first option. When white plays, the first option when white plays d3, just to defend their pawn in the center. We go ahead and develop our bishop on c5. Now, there are a variety of options to play in this position. But if white plays the first move, which is bishop g5, that's a blunder. And this is how we go about it. We begin with knight takes e4. Now, there are two options. Either bishop taking the queen, or either bishop going back to e3. So if bishop goes back to e3, we can just take that bishop, pawn takes, queen h4 check, g3, knight takes g3, h takes g3, and here we can take the rook on h1. Let's go back. Bishop takes d8, which is a total blunder. We go ahead and play bishop times f2, king e7, king e2, and bishop g4, checkmate. Position. In trap number 2, if white tries to defend their pawn on e4 with knight c3, we go ahead and proceed to play bishop c5, bishop c4, knight g4. Now we unleash our threat to attack the pawn which is on f2. Remember, pawn push is not possible because the bishop and the queen are watching the d4 square. So the variety of moves in this position, but if white tries to go for short castling, which is a blunder, this is a very huge blunder. We go ahead and unleash the reason why it's a blunder. We go ahead and play queen h4. If they try to chase the knight, which is h3, knight takes f2. Now there are two options in this position. Let's begin with the first option. So in this position, if white tries queen f3, this is a very beautiful possible checking sequence. Knight which begins with knight takes h3. Now here remember, the bishop is checking the king, at the same time the knight is checking the king. So there is no time for queen to take the knight because the check is 2 in 1. So here we go ahead to play king h1, then knight f2 check, there's a double check, there's a queen check, at the same time knight check. So it is 2 in 1 still. King g1 and then queen h1 checkmate. Let's go back. If in this position we play rook, in this position, if we play rook times f2, then we can just go ahead to play queen f2 with a decisive advantage. Knight c3 still, then bishop c5. Take control of the d4 square so that we try to delay the development of the d4 pawn by white. Bishop e2. So here we play a very astonishing pawn move, which is h5. h5 in order to hold our knight in case we are trying to plan to play our knight on g4. Short castling, trying to put the king to safety. Then now we come with our tactic. knight g4. Knight g4, we are threatening to, remember we have a pawn which is, bishop is eyeing on a pawn, knight is eyeing on a pawn, and also we are threatening to come in with the queen to add more pressure on the f2 pawn, at the same time threatening to checkmate. So white has to think and play energetically. h3, trying to go away from all the threats. Then we begin with queen d6. Now there are two options. If, for example, white begins with pawn takes knight, then we take pawn takes h4. Now we have a threat which is coming in, queen checkmate, because of the open column of the rook. So in case they play g3, then we can just take the pawn and say checkmate. Let's go back. After queen d6, we are threatening to give a checkmate because we have a combination of two pieces. So white has to think energetically. So majority of players in this position, they always think when they play g3, the threats are done. Now we come in with a sneaky move. Queen takes g3, takes g3 in check. So if king plays king h1 as the only move, then we can just checkmate. Trap number 4, which arises after e5, trying to attempt to go ahead and play pawn d4 so that they can take over the d4 square, which is okay. We go ahead and d3, which is a blunder. Then we come in with bishop c5. So bishop c5, we are trying to attack the pawn on f2, at the same time taking control of the d4 square. So if pawn takes e4, then we unleash our simple tactic. Bishop times f2. Remember, the king can't take the bishop because the queen will be taken for free. So majority of the players may try to play king e2, which prompts us to come with a bishop check. And after king takes bishop, then we take a free queen. Then knight e4. And in this position, we have looked at pawn d3. So now today we are going to look at d4. Here we come in with another very solid move for black, which is queen h4. In case of g3, then we unleash another strong move. This is another natural move, but it's losing the game. So we begin with knight takes g3. So here, remember knight is attacking the rook, at the same time attacking the bishop. So if, for example, you take this pawn with if you take pawn takes knight on g3, the rook will be falling. So if pawn takes knight, then we go queen e4 check. In case of queen e2, then we take a free rook. If white tries knight c3 to defend the pawn, then bishop c5 taking control of the d4 square. d3, which is a blunder, we begin with knight g4. Knight g4 is attacking the pawn which is on f2. So white has to defend his pawn. Bishop e3, knight takes e3, f takes e3, bishop takes e3, queen f3, developing and attacking the bishop which is on e3. Here we unleash another move, which is queen g5 to defend our bishop, at the same time creating space when we can try to go long castling or we can try to go short castling depending on the situation at hand. So in case white plays bishop e2, we have two options. We can try to play a bishop d2 check, stopping them from castling. Knight c3, we go with a normal move, bishop c5. In case of bishop e2, we try and play h5. We hold on our piece and trying to create a loft for our knight to come. h3, stopping the knight from going to d4. We begin with queen d4. Queen d4 is threatening checkmate in 1. So white has to defend. In this position, if white tries short castling, which is a blunder, it means that black is now winning. How? We begin with knight g4. Knight g4, we are adding more pressure to the pawn and threatening all the nasty tricks in this position. So h times g4, h times g4. Now we have opened up a column which is free for the rook. For example, if white begins with d3, then we go ahead and play queen e5. If g3, then queen takes g3 and it's checkmate. This position, if g3, then we go with queen e5. So there are two options for white. We have a king move to g2, at the same time d4. So in case of d4, we begin with queen h5, threatening to have checkmate in 1. Bishop h6, rook times h6, b3, queen h1, checkmate. In case of king g2, we begin with bishop times f2, just opening up the position. If king times f2, then rook h2, rook h2 check, king e3, queen times g3, bishop f3, bishop e6, d4, bishop c4 with a decisive advantage. After bishop times f2, if rook times f2, then queen h5, queen h5. If white tries a move like rook h5, then we have queen h2 check, king f1, queen h3 check, king f2, queen h2 check, queen e3, and here we have a decisive advantage because now the rook is falling off in this position. And this game, I believe it is quite playable. After pawn push, we can go for long castling, and then we bring the rook to check, or we bring another rook to check, and the game is totally winning. Trap number 8. In this position, if d3, then bishop c5, a normal developmental move to take control of the d4 square. h3, bishop times f2, king f2. If king g1, then queen d4 check, king h2, queen e5, and this can be used by strong players to draw. You can use this against strong players and you can draw the game. But in this position, if after knight e4, white plays king f3, then we go ahead and go for short castling. In the case of king times e4, then we have a very strong move which begins with queen h4 check. So white can try to run away and they can try to play king f3. Then we have a queen check, threatening to take the queen on d1. In the case of pawn defending that check, then we have another strong move. Bishop takes pawn, pawn takes bishop, then queen times h1 check. In the case of king f2, then we go ahead and play f5, trying to open up the position. If g5, then now we bring another rook in the attack. Queen f3, then we have queen h2 check, bishop g2, queen h4 check, blocking with the queen, queen g3 blocking. Then here we enter with another rook check, and I believe in this position, black with accurate play, they can go ahead and win the game. It is very, very, very vicious, and defending this position is very hard for white. So with accurate play, black can squeeze and they can get a win from this position.